Hey guys, tonight we wander through the thick, grey mist of a Scandinavian fjord, where the smell of salt and wet earth fills the air and a massive, sod-covered roof rises from the ground like a sleeping giant. You probably believe this place would be a chaotic, messy den of shouting warriors, but in reality, it was a carefully organized, quiet sanctuary of warmth and family. Before you get too comfortable and possibly fall asleep halfway through, tap like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this odd mix of boredom and history. It keeps the channel alive and the stories just sleepy enough to help you drift off again next time. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Leave a comment if you're still awake. Now, dim the lights, let the world outside grow quiet, and turn on a fan if you like that soft, steady hum in the background. Let your shoulders loosen and your breathing slow. This is your time to drift. No rush, no deadlines, no noise. Just you, a little warmth in the air, and the faint whisper of history waiting to unfold. So, settle in, and let's ease gently into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of a narrow dirt path, feeling the dampness of the northern air press against your skin. The world around you is painted in shades of deep green and slate gray. High above, the mountains are topped with a thin veil of white, and the sound of the nearby sea is a rhythmic, low vibration that seems to come from the earth itself. Before you lies the Longhouse, a structure so long and low that it seems to be an extension of the hill. It is shaped like an inverted ship, a common design for these people who spent so much of their lives upon the waves. The roof is not made of shingles or slate, but of thick, heavy layers of turf. In the dim evening light, you see the grass on the roof swaying gently in the breeze. It is easy to imagine that the house is a living thing, breathing in the mist and exhaling the scent of the soil. You might even find it funny to think that if you were a very hungry goat, this roof would be your favorite 5-star restaurant. You walk slowly toward the entrance, your boots sinking slightly into the soft, muddy ground. Each step feels heavy and intentional. The exterior walls are thick, built from stones and timber, and packed with earth to keep the biting winter wind at bay. As you reach the door, you notice it is much smaller than you expected. You have to bow your head slightly, a physical gesture of respect to the home you are about to enter. The wood of the door is dark and weathered, textured with the deep grooves of an axe and the natural patterns of the grain. You reach out and touch the iron handle. It is cold and solid, a piece of metal forged in a fire, much like the one waiting for you inside. You feel the weight of the timber as you push it open, the hinges moving with a slow, heavy groan that tells of many years and many winters. As you step across the threshold, the air changes instantly. The sharp, cold bite of the salt spray is replaced by a thick, heavy warmth. The air inside is rich with the smell of wood smoke, dried herbs, and the faint, sweet scent of hay. It is a sensory blanket that wraps around you, making your eyes feel heavy and your heart rate slow. The interior is vast and cavernous, stretching out into the shadows like a wooden cathedral. There are no windows here to let in the harsh light of the moon or the distraction of the stars. Instead, the only light comes from the long hearth in the center of the room, and a few flickering oil lamps hanging from the rafters. The light is soft and amber, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. It is the kind of light that makes every object look like a treasure and every corner feel like a secret. You look up and see the massive timber posts that hold the roof aloft. These are the bones of the house, great trunks of oak or pine that were selected for their strength and longevity. They stand in 2 long rows, dividing the space into 3 distinct aisles. This 3-aisle design is a mainstream historical fact, a standard architecture that allowed the heavy sod roof to be supported without the walls collapsing under the weight of the snow. These pillars are deeply carved with swirling patterns, knots that wind around the wood like snakes or vines. You run your fingers over one of the posts, feeling the smoothness of the wood. Where generations of hands have touched it, it feels like leaning against a giant who has been standing still for 100 years just to keep you dry. You might think this is a bit like a modern open-concept apartment, except there is no fee, and the ceiling is occasionally inhabited by very confused birds. As you move deeper into the hall, you notice how the floor is made of hard, packed earth. It is surprisingly clean, swept with branches and covered in some areas with fresh rushes or straw to provide insulation and a soft surface for walking. The center of the room is dominated by the hearth, a long pit lined with stones where the fire never truly goes out. The smoke rises in a lazy, spiraling column toward a small hole in the roof. This hole, the byre, is the only source of ventilation and a tiny glimpse of the sky. Historians still argue whether these holes were kept open during heavy storms or if a translucent animal membrane was used to cover them, while still allowing a ghostly gray light to filter through. You watch the smoke as it drifts, a gray ghost moving through the rafters, coating the wood in a protective layer of soot that prevents rot and insects from taking hold. The silence here is not empty. It is a full, textured silence made of small, natural sounds. You hear the crackle of a log shifting in the fire, the soft rustle of the straw under your feet, and the distant, muffled sound of the wind outside. It is a place that feels safe, a wooden fortress where the chaos of the world cannot reach you. You see the long benches that run along the sides of the hall. These are wide and sturdy, built directly into the structure of the house. They serve as seats during the day and beds during the night. The height of the bench often indicated your social status, which makes you wonder if being tall was a prerequisite for being a Viking leader, or if they just liked the view from the top of the wooden platform. It is a humble setup, but in this light, the rough wood looks as warm as gold. You move to one of these benches and sit down, feeling the solid support of the timber. The wood is cool at first, but it quickly warms to your touch. From here, you can see the entire length of the hall. It is a masterpiece of functional design, where every inch of space has a purpose. The walls are lined with woven tapestries and hanging furs, which are not just for decoration, but serve as crucial insulation against the creeping frost. You notice the way the light catches the metallic threads in a hanging cloth, a small flash of color in the shadows. This is a place of stories, where the walls have listened to the low hum of voices for centuries. It feels as though the house itself is a vessel, carrying its inhabitants through the dark sea of the winter months. Looking toward the far end of the hall, you see the outlines of storage chests and barrels. These hold the survival of the householdy dried fish, grains, and the precious supply of ale. Everything is neatly tucked away, a quiet testament to the discipline required to live in such a harsh climate. You realize that the Longhouse is not just a building, it is a living machine, a system of heat and shelter that operates on the simple logic of fire and wood. The scale of it is humbling. Some of these structures could reach lengths of 150 to 250 feet, making them some of the largest domestic buildings in the world at the time. To stand at one end and look toward the other is to see a long tunnel of history, illuminated by the orange glow of the embers. A quirky tidbit that many people forget is that the Vikings often used their roofs for more than just keeping the rain out. In the summer months, the thick grass on the roof was sometimes used to graze small livestock like goats or sheep, which were lifted up there to enjoy the high-altitude snacks. You imagine a goat standing directly above your head right now, munching on a piece of clover while you sit in the warmth below. It is a funny image that softens the imposing nature of the great hall. The house is a part of the landscape, a hill that people happen to build a door into. It represents a harmony with the environment, a realization that to survive the North, you must become part of the North. As you sit in the stillness, your breathing begins to sync with the rhythm of the fire. The flickering light is hypnotic, drawing your gaze into the center of the coals, where the heat is a deep, glowing red. You feel the tension leaving your shoulders, the weight of your day dissolving in the smoky air. There is no urgency here, no clocks ticking on the walls, no screens flashing with noise. There is only the slow passage of time, marked by the gradual shortening of the logs and the cooling of the earth outside. You are a guest in this ancient space, invited to rest among the shadows and the timber. You notice the detail of the floor again, seeing how the earth has been worn smooth in the high traffic areas. Near the hearth, the ground is dry and dusty, while further back, near the walls, it retains a hint of the dampness from the world outside. You see the marks of tools on the wooden beams, the rhythmic scars left by the adze and the chisel. Each mark is a record of a person's labor, a physical memory of the hands that built this sanctuary. It makes the house feel human, a collection of efforts meant to protect those who dwell within. You feel a sense of gratitude for the thick walls and the heavy roof, a comfort that comes from knowing you are shielded from the elements. The air remains still, the smoke continuing its slow dance toward the Lelje. You feel a slight draft from the door, a tiny finger of cold air that only serves to make the warmth of the hearth feel more precious. It is a reminder that the wild is just a few feet away, but here you are in the heart of civilization. The Longhouse is a world unto itself, a microcosm of Viking society where every person had a place and every object had a home. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sensory details wash over you. The scent of the pine, the warmth of the fire, the texture of the rough bench. It is a symphony of the simple, a lullaby of the ancient world. As you prepare to move further into the hall in your mind, you take one last look at the great entrance. The heavy door stands as a silent sentry, guarding the peace of the interior. The light of the fire reflects off the iron hinges, a small sparkle in the dimness. You realize that you have only just begun to uncover the secrets of this place. There are corners yet to be explored, stories yet to be told, and mysteries hidden in the grain of the wood. But for now, you are content to simply be here, to exist in this moment of quiet transition. The world outside is fading, and the world of the Longhouse is becoming your reality. The flickering amber light begins to pull you toward the center of the room, toward the hearth that acts as the beating heart of the structure. You rise slowly from the bench, your movements soft and unhurried. The floor is firm beneath your feet, and the air feels even warmer as you step closer to the fire. You are moving deeper into the glow, leaving the shadows of the entrance behind. The journey through the Longhouse is a journey into the soul of a culture, a path illuminated by the embers of the past. You feel the pull of the warmth, the invitation to sit and listen to the stories that the fire has to tell. The structural posts seem to lean in as you walk, their carved faces watching your progress with wooden indifference. You are a visitor in their realm, a fleeting presence in a house built to endure. The sense of permanence is overwhelming, a grounding force that makes your own worries feel small and insignificant. You are surrounded by the labor of ancestors, the wisdom of builders who knew how to turn a forest and a field into a home. Each beam and each stone is a promise of safety, a vow kept against the cold of 1,000 winters. You find yourself smiling at the thought of the goats on the roof, a small touch of humor in the grand scale of the architecture. It is this balance of the epic and the domestic that makes the Longhouse so fascinating. As you approach the hearth, you see the stones that line the pit. They are blackened by soot and cracked by the heat, yet they remain in place, holding the fire in its designated spot. You see the ashes at the edge, a soft gray powder that looks like fallen snow. The fire itself is a low, steady burn, a collection of glowing coals that radiate a gentle, consistent heat. This is the source of all life in the house, the sun around which the inhabitants orbit. You find a spot near the fire and settle down, feeling the heat soak into your bones. The journey has truly begun, and the secrets of the timber hall are starting to reveal themselves, one flickering flame at a time. You realize that the construction of this house was a communal effort, a task that required the cooperation of the entire village. To fell the massive trees, to haul the heavy stones, to cut and lay the thick sod. It was a labor of love and necessity. This collective history is baked into the very walls. You feel the presence of the community in the width of the benches and the size of the hearth. This was not a house for a solitary person. It was a house for a tribe. It was a place where stories were shared, where plans were made, and where the future was forged in the heat of the fire. The Longhouse is a testament to the power of togetherness, a wooden embrace that held a family safe against the dark. The light dances on the carved pillars, bringing the wooden knots to life. You imagine the stories they might represent, the tales of gods and heroes, of great voyages and narrow escapes. These carvings were not just art, they were a way of keeping history alive in a world without books. Every line and every curve had a meaning, a message passed down through the generations. You feel a deep connection to the past as you look at them, a sense of being part of a long, unbroken chain of human experience. The Longhouse is a bridge between then and now, a place where the ancient and the modern meet in the soft glow of the embers. Your eyes begin to grow heavy as the warmth of the hearth settles over you. The world is small and quiet, reduced to the space between the fire and the timber posts. You feel the weight of the day lifting, replaced by a deep, restful calm. The Longhouse has welcomed you, offering its secrets and its shelter. You are ready to listen, ready to drift, and ready to discover the secrets that lie within the glowing heart of the fire. The shadows are soft, the wood is warm, and the night is long. There is plenty of time to explore, plenty of time to rest, and plenty of time to dream. You slowly move your hand toward the warmth, feeling the air tingle against your palms as you edge closer to the long hearth. The fire pit is a masterpiece of simple engineering, stretching nearly the entire length of the central aisle. It is a shallow trench, lined carefully with large, flat stones that have been smoothed by the constant expansion and contraction of heat over many decades. You notice how the stones at the very center are a pale, chalky gray, almost white from the intensity of the core, while those at the outer edges are stained a deep, oily black from soot and spilled stews. There is something deeply hypnotic about the way the embers pulse, a rhythmic glow that feels like the slow heartbeat of the house itself. You find yourself staring into the shifting landscape of the coals, where mountains of orange light crumble into valleys of glowing red dust. As you settle onto the floor near the stones, the heat begins to seep through your clothing, relaxing muscles you didn't even realize were tense. It is a heavy, radiant heat that doesn't just sit on your skin, but feels as though it is warming you from the inside out. You think about how this fire is the only thing standing between the people here and the brutal, unforgiving winter outside. A mainstream historical fact is that the hearth was kept burning 24 hours a day throughout the entire year, because the effort required to restart a dead fire with flint and steel was far greater than the effort of simply feeding a few logs to a sleeping flame. To let the fire go out was more than just a domestic mistake. It was seen as a sign of a failing household, a cold hearth representing a cold spirit. You imagine the fire tender, perhaps the youngest or the oldest in the family, quietly adding a piece of peat or a branch of birch in the middle of the night, while everyone else slept in the shadows. The scent of the fire is complex and layered. It isn't just the sharp, clean smell of burning wood, because wood was often scarce in certain parts of the north. The Vikings frequently used dried peat as fuel, which adds a heavy, earthy, and slightly sweet aroma to the air. It smells like the very foundation of the earth being turned into energy. Mingled with this is the faint, savory scent of animal fat and boiled grains, as the soapstone pots often sat directly on the hot stones at the edge of the pit. You might find it amusing to think that the entire house basically smelled like a very large, very smoky kitchen, 24 hours a day. If you were a person who enjoyed the scent of a campfire, this would be your personal paradise, though your laundry would certainly never smell like Mountain Spring ever again. You look up, following the path of the smoke as it rises in lazy, elegant ribbons toward the high ceiling. The air at your level is surprisingly clear, a result of the clever way the Longhouse was designed to breathe. The cold air entering through the low doors and the gaps in the stone footings pushes the warmer, smokier air upward, creating a natural chimney effect even without a physical flue. Historians still argue whether the ventilation in these homes was actually efficient enough to prevent long-term health issues, or if the inhabitants simply lived in a permanent state of mild squinting and coughing. You watch as the smoke swirls around the rafters, coating the wood in a thick, protective layer of shiny black tar. This soot was actually a functional part of the house, acting as a natural pesticide and wood preservative that kept the timber from rotting in the damp climate. It is a strange thought that the very thing that might irritate your eyes was also the thing keeping the roof from falling on your head. The light produced by the hearth is a living thing, constantly moving and changing the shape of the room. It doesn't reach the far corners of the hall, which remain draped in a velvet like darkness. Instead, the fire creates a golden circle of safety, a small island of visibility in a sea of shadows. You notice how the light catches the edges of the wooden pillars, making the carving seem to shift and move. One moment, a carved dragon looks as though it is baring its teeth, and the next, it seems to be sleeping peacefully. This flickering quality of the light is what gave the old stories their power. When a storyteller spoke of monsters in the dark, the audience only had to look toward the corners of the room to see the shadows dancing in agreement. It makes you feel small, but in a way that is comforting, like being a tiny part of a much larger, older story. A quirky and somewhat strange tidbit about Viking fire starting involves a specific type of fungus known as the Thunderhoof, or Fums fomentarius. To make it extra flammable, they would often slice it thin and boil it in human urine for several days. The nitrates in the liquid would soak into the fungus, creating a material that could catch even the tiniest spark from a piece of iron. It's the kind of historical detail that makes you glad for modern matches, or at least makes you look at your chemistry set with a bit more appreciation. You imagine a Viking sitting exactly where you are, carefully striking a piece of flint against a steel striker, hoping for that one golden spark to land on a piece of treated mushroom. It was a moment of high tension, a small victory of human will over the cold. As you sit, you notice the tools of the hearth leaning against a nearby post. There are long iron tongues, heavy and pitted from the heat, and a wooden shovel used for moving the ash. Everything is built for durability rather than beauty. You see a large tripod made of forged iron standing over a section of the fire, holding a heavy cauldron. The liquid inside isn't boiling currently, but it gives off a gentle, rhythmic hum as it nears the simmer. You can hear the soft, metallic sound of the chain clinking as the heat causes the tripod to settle slightly into the earth. It is a domestic sound, as familiar to the people of this time as the sound of a ticking clock would be to you. It marks the passage of time through the preparation of food and the maintenance of the home. The hearth also served as the legal and social center of the household. In many northern cultures, the concept of hearth peace was a sacred law. To commit an act of violence, or even to speak a grave insult while sitting by another person's fire, was considered a crime against the gods themselves. This fire was a neutral zone, a place where even enemies might sit and share warmth for a night. You feel the weight of that ancient peace now, a sense that as long as you are near these stones, you are protected. The fire is a witness to every pact made and every secret whispered. It is the silent observer of family life, seeing the births, the deaths, and the quiet moments in between. You lean back slightly, resting your elbows on the edge of the wooden bench behind you. The contrast between the warmth on your face and the slight, cool draft against your back is invigorating. It reminds you that the house is a barrier, a thin skin of wood and sod stretched over a community. You listen to the sound of the wind as it brushes against the roof high above. It makes a low, whistling sound as it passes over the smoke hole, a hollow note that sounds like someone blowing across the top of a giant bottle. Inside, however, the air is still. The fire burns steadily, its light reflecting off the many small objects scattered around the hearth. A dropped spindle, a small wooden cup, a whetstone for sharpening knives. Each object tells a story of the work that happens here during the day. The shadows on the ceiling are long and spindly, reaching down like the fingers of the forest. You find yourself tracing the patterns of the smoke once more, watching how it clumps together before being drawn out into the night. It is a slow, hypnotic process, and your eyelids feel heavier with every passing minute. The warmth of the fire is like a gentle hand pressing down on your chest, encouraging you to breathe deeply and slowly. You are safe here, tucked away in the heart of the timber hall, surrounded by the echoes of 1,000 years of hospitality. The fire doesn't judge, it only warms. It doesn't demand, it only gives. You think about the hearth, tax, a mainstream historical reality where wealth and status were often measured by the number of fires a person could afford to keep burning. In a large longhouse like this, the central fire was a sign of the chieftain's ability to provide for his people. To have a fire this large, burning this brightly, meant that there was plenty of fuel, plenty of food, and plenty of strength within these walls. It was a glowing advertisement of success. You feel a sense of pride by association, as if by sitting here, you are part of a thriving, powerful household. The fire is a symbol of life's persistence in a place where the sun disappears for months at a time. As the night deepens, the fire changes character. The bright, snapping flames of the evening give way to the steady, intense glow of the midnight coals. The orange light softens into a deep, bruised purple and gold. This is the time when the house is at its quietest, when the only sound is the occasional settling of a log or the distant, muffled movement of the animals in the far end of the hall. You feel the isolation of the longhouse, a single spark of humanity in a vast, dark wilderness. But inside the circle of the hearth, there is no fear. There is only the comfort of the known, the reliability of the heat, and the steady presence of the timber. You notice how the ash at the edge of the pit has formed a soft, gray blanket. This ash was actually very useful. It could be used to preserve eggs, to make soap, or even to scrub the wooden tables after a feast. Nothing was wasted in the longhouse economy. Even the residue of the fire had a purpose. You imagine the hands of a woman reaching into the cold edges of the pit in the morning, gathering the ash into a bucket. Every part of the fire's life cycle was integrated into the survival of the family. It makes you realize how disconnected we have become from the sources of our warmth and light. And there is a certain sweetness in this direct connection to the elements. A humorous thought occurs to you as you look at the smoke hole again. You wonder if, on very clear nights, the person sleeping directly under the hole ever got distracted by a single star looking back at them, or if they ever got a face full of snow during a particularly enthusiastic blizzard. It seems like a very Viking problem to have. trying to maintain your dignity, while a snowflake lands directly on your nose in the middle of a serious dream. It adds a touch of the mundane to the epic scale of the whole, a reminder that these were real people with wet noses and cold feet, just like anyone else. The warmth has now fully penetrated your boots, and your toes feel toasted and comfortable. You shift your position, feeling the rough texture of the floor through your socks. The earth is packed so hard it feels almost like stone, yet it retains a certain organic quality that modern floors lack. It feels grounded, literally and figuratively. You are sitting on the very skin of the world, protected by a shell of oak and turf. The fire continues to pulse, a rhythmic glow that matches the pace of your own relaxed breathing. You feel a profound sense of gemv, or the feeling of being home, even though this place is vastly different from anything you have ever known. You watch as a single, small flame licks the side of a charred log, a bright blue flicker that stands out against the orange and red. This blue flame is the sign of gases escaping the wood, a tiny chemical dance happening right before your eyes. It is beautiful in its simplicity. You feel like a scholar of the flame, observing the minute details of the combustion process without any need for books or laboratories. The fire is the teacher, and the lesson is simply one of presence. Be here, be warm, be still. The silence of the hall seems to grow thicker as the fire settles. The great wooden posts are like silent guardians, their carved eyes reflecting the embers. You feel as though you could sit here for an eternity, watching the coals turn to ash and the ash turn to dust. The worries of your modern life, the emails, the deadlines, the noise of traffic, are so far away they might as well be on another planet. Here, the only deadline is the need to add another log before the glow fades, and the only notification is the soft pop of a sap pocket in the wood. It is a digital detox of the most ancient kind. Historians still argue whether the seating arrangements around the hearth were strictly enforced by law or simply by tradition. Some believe that the closer you sat to the fire, the higher your status, while others suggest that the high seat of the chieftain was positioned specifically to catch the best light, but not necessarily the most intense heat. You find yourself wondering where you would fit in this social hierarchy. Perhaps you would be the one tucked in the medium warmth zone, close enough to feel the glow, but far enough away to avoid the stray sparks. It seems like a sensible place to be, a quiet observer of the fire and the people it serves. You feel a wave of sleepiness wash over you, a gentle tide that pulls at your consciousness. The warmth of the hearth is a sedative, a natural remedy for the restlessness of the mind. The Longhouse has a way of slowing everything down, of bringing your focus to the immediate and the essential. You are no longer a traveler in time. You are simply a person sitting by a fire, listening to the night. The orange glow is a blanket, the smoke is a veil, and the stones are a foundation. Everything is as it should be. The flickering light begins to dim slightly as the uppermost logs are consumed, leaving a cavern of glowing embers. The heat remains intense, a steady thrum of energy radiating from the stones. You realize that even when the flames are gone, the hearth will remain warm for hours. A thermal battery that keeps the hall temperate until the morning sun touches the roof. It is a comforting thought, a promise of continued safety even in the darkest hours of the night. You close your eyes for a second, letting the afterimage of the fire dance behind your lids, a kaleidoscope of gold and crimson. The world outside is a distant memory. There is no fjord, no mountain, no cold sea. There is only the longhouse, the timber, and the hearth. You are at the center of the world, and the center is warm. You take a long, slow breath, inhaling the scent of the peat and the old wood. It is the smell of survival, of comfort, and of home. You are ready to move on, to see where the shadows lead. But you will carry the warmth of this fire with you into the deeper parts of the hall. The hearth has given you its blessing, a golden glow that lingers in your bones and calms your heart. As you prepare to stand, your movements are fluid and slow, as if you are moving through water. You don't want to disturb the peace of the fire or the silence of the room. You take one last look at the glowing stones, a silent thank you to the fire that has welcomed you. The journey continues into the shadows, but the heart of the house remains, beating steadily in the dark, a glowing reminder that even in the coldest world, there is a place of warmth waiting for those who know how to find it. You leave the flickering amber circle of the hearth and begin to move toward the outer edges of the great hall, where the shadows are thick and velvet-like. The air here is cooler, carrying a slight scent of aged pine and the dry, dusty aroma of straw. As you walk, your feet find the raised wooden platforms that line the walls, known as the parlor. These are the versatile foundations of Viking domestic life, serving as benches for eating and working during the daylight hours and transforming into expansive sleeping quarters. Once the sun dips below the horizon, you step up onto one of these platforms, feeling the sturdy, unyielding nature of the timber beneath you. It is a wide space, much larger than a modern bed, designed to accommodate entire families huddled together for warmth. You imagine this longhouse as a giant, wooden ribcage, and you are currently nestled against its side, seeking a place to rest your head. The darkness in this part of the hall is not empty. It is filled with the textures of survival. You reach out and run your hand along the wall, feeling the rough, hewn planks and the occasional gap filled with moss or sheep's wool to block the drafts. Hanging from the rafters above the benches are various textiles, heavy woolen blankets known as wadmal and thick, oily sheepskins. A mainstream historical fact is that wadmal was so vital to the Viking economy that it was used as a form of legal tender, a soft currency that could buy everything from a cow to a passage on a ship. You pull a piece of this fabric toward you, feeling its incredible weight and the scratchy, reassuring coarseness of the fibers. It smells of lanolin and distant rain, a scent that has lingered in the wool since it was first sheared from a hardy mountain sheep. As you explore the length of the benches, you notice that not all sleeping areas are created equal. The social hierarchy of the longhouse is written in the very wood of the platforms. Near the center of the hall, closest to the warmth and the light of the fire, the benches are higher and covered with finer fabrics, linen sheets, and perhaps even imported silks for the very wealthy. As you move toward the darker, draftier ends of the building, the bedding becomes simpler, consisting of loose straw and rougher hides. It is a subtle, silent map of status. You might think of it as the original version of a first-class cabin versus coach, except in coach, you are sleeping next to a pile of dried fish, and the family's youngest, most energetic toddler It's a bit like trying to sleep in an IKEA showroom that has been redesigned by a very cold mountain man who only likes the color brown. Further down the hall, you encounter the most intriguing secret of the Viking sleeping quarters, the lokrekja, or the locked bed. These are essentially small, wooden closets built directly into the structure of the house, featuring their own walls and a heavy, sliding or hinged door. You stand before one of these units, looking at the dark, polished wood. To a modern eye, it looks remarkably like a large cupboard or even a sarcophagus, but to a Viking chieftain, it was the height of luxury and security. You place your hand on the door and slide it open with a low, wooden hiss. Inside, the space is small and intimate, barely large enough for two people to lie down. It is a room within a room, a private sanctuary in a house that otherwise offers no privacy at all. Historians still argue whether these closed beds were designed primarily as a defense against the biting cold of the sub-Arctic nights, or if they served as a primitive form of a panic room, providing a few extra seconds of protection against an unexpected midnight assassination attempt. There is a certain tension in the idea of locking yourself into a wooden box while you sleep, a physical manifestation of the dangers that lurked in the Viking world. You climb inside the small space, feeling the air grow still and warm almost instantly. The walls of the bed closet are lined with furs, and the floor is a deep mattress of down feathers or soft hay. It is the quietest place you have ever been. The sounds of the longhouse, the crackle of the fire, the distant sigh of the wind, are muffled and distant, as if they are happening in another world entirely. Inside the lokrekja, you find a small wooden shelf where a person might keep their most precious belongings, a comb made of antler, a small knife, or a lucky stone. You also notice a heavy iron latch on the inside of the door. It is a strange feeling to think about locking your bed. You might joke that it's the only way to get some peace and quiet when your roommates are snoring loud enough to wake the gods in Valhalla, or perhaps it was the 9th century version of a "do not disturb" sign. In a world where you lived 8 and worked with 30 other people in a single room, this small, dark box was the only place where your thoughts could truly be your own. It is a cozy, if somewhat claustrophobic refuge. A quirky and lesser-known tidbit about these sleeping arrangements is the use of sleep stones. On particularly brutal nights, the inhabitants would take large, smooth stones from the edge of the hearth, wrap them in scraps of old wadmal, and tuck them at the foot of their beds. These stones acted like ancient hot water bottles, slowly releasing their captured heat into the blankets throughout the night. You imagine the feeling of your toes finding a warm, smooth stone under a pile of furs, a small but profound comfort when the world outside is buried under 3 feet of snow. It's the kind of practical, low-tech solution that makes you realize these people were masters of squeezing every bit of comfort out of a harsh environment. You emerge from the locked bed and return to the open benches, feeling the vastness of the hall once again. The shadows seem to pulse with the rhythm of the house. You notice the way the light from the dying fire occasionally glints off the high seat pillars near the center of the room. These were the most prestigious seats in the house, where the master and mistress of the home would sit and sleep. These pillars were often treated as sacred objects. If a Viking family moved to a new home, They would sometimes throw their high seat pillars into the sea as they approached the coast, believing that the gods would wash the timber ashore at the spot where the new longhouse should be built. You look at the pillars near you and wonder what journeys they have taken and what secrets they have seen in the middle of the night. The blankets on the benches are arranged in a specific way, often folded back to reveal the layers beneath. You see a mattress made of a large linen sack stuffed with dried seagrass. This wasn't just for comfort. The salt in the seagrass helped to repel insects and lice, which were a constant battle in a home filled with wool and livestock. It is a reminder that the secrets of the longhouse were often very practical, born of a need to stay healthy and clean in a crowded space. You run your hand over the linen, finding it surprisingly smooth and cool compared to the heavy wool of the wadmal. The combination of textures is part of the sensory language of the home. The scratch of the wool, the coolness of the linen, the softness of the fur, and the hardness of the oak. You sit back on the bench, pulling a heavy bearskin over your legs. The fur is thick and dense, a dark brown landscape that seems to swallow the dim light. It is incredibly warm, a weight that feels like a protective hand. You look toward the ceiling, where the rafters are lost in the gloom. Somewhere up there, a small bird might be nesting, tucked into the thatch away from the smoke. Down here, the world is focused on the horizontal plane of the benches. You think about the breath of the house, the collective sound of dozens of people breathing in their sleep. It is a communal experience, a shared vulnerability that bound the household together. In the Viking Age, sleeping alone was a rarity, often a sign of exile or extreme misfortune. To be surrounded by the sounds of your kin was to be safe. You imagine the evening routines that would take place right where you are sitting. There would be no frantic scrolling through phones or late-night television. Instead, there would be the slow, methodical work of unlacing leather boots, the folding of tunics, and the quiet murmurs of parents telling stories to their children. The transition to sleep was a long, gentle process, dictated by the fading of the light and the cooling of the hearth. You feel that same slowness now, a deceleration of your internal clock. The longhouse doesn't care about your deadlines or your anxieties. It only cares about the cycle of the seasons and the steady burning of the fire. You are being invited to let go, to sink into the shadows and the straw. A light joke might be made about the Viking pillow, which was often just a rolled-up cloak or a small bag filled with soft moss. If you were very lucky, you might have a cushion stuffed with the down of an eider duck, a luxury that was highly prized and often used as a diplomatic gift. You shift your position, imagining a pillow of moss against your cheek. It would be cool and slightly damp, smelling of the forest floor. It is a far cry from a memory foam pillow, but in the silence of the longhouse, with the warmth of the fire still radiating from the stones, it would likely feel like the greatest luxury on earth. You realize that comfort is entirely relative. When the wind is howling outside, a sturdy roof and a dry blanket are all you need to feel like a king. The shadows around the sleeping closets seem to grow deeper as you watch. You notice a small carving on the frame of one of the bed closets. A simple protective charm, perhaps a sun wheel or a series of runes meant to ward off bad dreams or nightmares. The Vikings believed that spirits could travel through the air while people slept, and the architecture of the bed was the final line of defense. You feel a sense of respect for the way they integrated their beliefs into every corner of their home. Nothing was just a piece of furniture. Everything was a participant in the spiritual life of the family. The bed was a place of dreaming, and dreaming was a way of communicating with the unseen world. You watch as a single spark from the hearth flies upward, a tiny orange star that vanishes into the smoke. It reminds you of how fleeting life could be in the north, and how much effort went into creating this bubble of warmth. The sleeping benches are not just places to rest. They are the stage where the most intimate parts of life occurred. This is where children were born, where the elderly passed away in the arms of their families, and where the next day's plans were whispered in the dark. The wood of the benches has absorbed these moments, becoming a silent archive of the family's history. You feel like you are sitting on a library of lives, each grain of wood a different story. The silence of the hall is now punctuated by the soft, rhythmic sound of the wood talking as it cools. Small creaks and groans echo through the timber, a natural symphony of expansion and contraction. It sounds like the house is settling its bones, preparing for its own version of sleep. You find yourself leaning into the corner, where the bench meets a structural post, feeling the intersection of horizontal and vertical strength. It is a very solid place to be. You think about the bed benches in the context of the long winter, when the sun might only appear for a few hours a day. During those times, these benches became the center of the universe, a place to stay under the firs and wait for the light to return. You notice the way the light catches a hanging tapestry near the master's bed. It is a scene of a great hunt, woven in muted reds and greens. In the dimness, the figures seem to vibrate, as if they are ready to step off the fabric and join you in the hall. This was the Viking version of wallpaper, providing both beauty and a much-needed layer of insulation. You realize that every object in this space had to earn its keep. There was no room for the useless or the purely decorative. Everything had to contribute to the warmth, the order, or the soul of the house. It is a disciplined way of living, but one that creates a profound sense of harmony. Historians still argue whether the presence of slaves or thralls in the same sleeping area as the free family members was a common occurrence, or if they were relegated to the barn area at the end of the house. Some evidence suggests that in smaller households, everyone slept in the same hall, separated only by the distance from the fire. This would mean that the Longhouse was a place of extreme social proximity, where the breath of a king and the breath of a slave mingled in the same smoky air. It is a humbling thought, a reminder of the shared human condition in the face of the elements. You look toward the darker end of the hall and imagine the quiet figures huddled there, seeking the same warmth you are currently enjoying. The bearskin over your legs feels heavier now, a comforting weight that grounds you. You find yourself looking at your hands in the dim light, seeing how they look different in this ancient amber glow. You are a part of this scene now, a traveler who has found a place to rest. The Longhouse has a way of erasing the centuries, making the modern world feel like a strange and distant dream. You are no longer thinking about your car, your phone, or your job. You are thinking about the warmth of the stone, the smell of the wool, and the safety of the timber walls. The simplicity of it is a relief, a balm for a busy mind. A quirky detail that brings a smile to your face is the concept of the bed companion. In many northern stories, travelers would be offered a place on the bench next to the family, sometimes even sharing a blanket with a stranger to conserve heat. It was the ultimate gesture of trust and hospitality. You imagine being a traveler who has just walked through a blizzard, only to be welcomed into this hall and told to find a spot on the bench. The lack of personal space was balanced by an abundance of human warmth. It is a stark contrast to our modern world of fences and locked front doors. And there is something beautiful in that ancient vulnerability. As you sit in the deepening quiet, you feel the urge to close your eyes and let the sounds of the house wash over you. The low hum of the wind, the settling of the logs, the distant rustle of straw. It is a lullaby for the ages. You are tucked into the shadows of the sleeping closets, protected by the secrets of the timber. The darkness is not a void, it is a presence, a soft blanket that covers the house and all its inhabitants. You feel the tension draining from your body, starting at your toes and moving up through your legs and back. You are becoming a part of the bench, a part of the hall, a part of the history. The flickering light of the hearth is now just a memory on your retinas, a ghost of gold in the darkness. You are ready for the next part of the journey, even as your body calls for rest. The longhouse continues to hold you, its massive beams and sod roof standing watch over your peace. You are safe in the closet of shadows, a place where time has stopped, and the only thing that matters is the rhythm of your own breath. You take one last deep breath of the pine, scented air, and settle deeper into the furs, ready to see what other secrets are waiting for you in the cold, quiet corners of the hall. The journey through the longhouse is a journey toward the center of yourself, a path that leads away from the noise of the world and into the stillness of the past. You have found the heart of the hearth and the sanctuary of the sleeping benches. You are starting to understand the logic of the Vikings, not as warriors, but as people who knew how to make a home in the most difficult of places. You are ready to explore further, to see where the animals rest and where the treasures are hidden. But for now, you simply exist in the warmth of the shadows. The locked door of the bed, closet, is a symbol of a world that knew how to protect what was precious, and right now, your peace is the most precious thing of all. You stand up from the comfort of the sleeping bench, the heavy bearskin sliding from your lap like a slow, dark wave. The warmth of the hearth is still a glowing presence at your back, but as you begin to walk toward the far end of the longhouse, you notice a subtle shift in the environment. The air becomes slightly heavier, thicker with the scent of dried meadow grass, damp earth, and the undeniable, musky sweetness of living creatures. This is the transition from the living quarters to the byre, the section of the house where the four-legged members of the family spend their winter nights. It is a transition that many modern minds find difficult to imagine, yet it was the very key to survival in the frozen north. You are moving toward the barn end of the hall, a place where the line between human and animal life becomes beautifully, warmly blurred. As you step past the final timber post of the main hall, the floor beneath your feet changes. The hard-packed earth remains, but it is now covered in a much deeper layer of fresh straw and bracken. You notice that the floor here actually slopes slightly downward. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Longhouse was almost always built on a slight incline, with the living quarters at the higher end and the animal stalls at the lower end. This clever bit of ancient engineering ensured that any liquid waste would naturally drain away from the family's beds and toward the far exit. You might think of it as the world's first gravity-based plumbing system, though it certainly didn't come with a fresh linen scent. It is a practical solution to a messy reality, a reminder that Viking life was a constant dance with the practicalities of the natural world. The darkness here feels different, more organic, more alive. You hear the slow, rhythmic sound of a cow chewing its cud, a steady, grinding noise that is strangely soothing in its consistency. There is also the soft, occasional rustle of a sheep shifting its weight in the straw. The heat in this part of the building is not the sharp, dry heat of the fire, but a humid, enveloping warmth generated by the bodies of the livestock. You see the faint glint of a large, dark eye as a cow turns its head to watch you pass. Her breath comes in small, ghostly clouds of steam that catch the distant, amber light of the hearth. You feel as though you have walked into a giant, living radiator. It is a cozy, breathing furnace that works even when the wood pile is running low. You reach out and touch one of the wooden partitions that divide the space into individual stalls. The wood here is different from the carved pillars of the main hall. It is rougher, often made of woven wattle or sturdy willow branches. These partitions were essential for keeping the animals organized and preventing them from jostling each other in the dark. You run your hand over the weave of the branches, feeling the strength and flexibility of the construction. It is a humble kind of architecture, but it is what kept the family's most valuable assets, their cattle and sheep, safe from the wolves and the frost. You might joke that this is the original room and board, where the board is a wooden fence and the room is shared with a creature that weighs half a ton and has very questionable table manners. A quirky and somewhat surprising tidbit about this shared living arrangement involves the collection of animal urine. While it sounds rather unappealing to our modern sensibilities, the Vikings were masters of recycling. They would often collect the urine in stone-lined pits or barrels because it was a vital ingredient in many of their industrial processes. The ammonia in the liquid was used to bleach wool, to tan leather, and even as a primitive detergent for cleaning. In a world without chemical plants, the byre was essentially a small-scale chemical factory. You imagine a Viking housewife looking at a bucket of cow urine with the same practical satisfaction that you might look at a new bottle of high-end floor cleaner. It is a detail that grounds the legendary Viking image in the gritty, resourceful reality of farm life. Historians still argue whether the animals remained in these stalls for the entire duration of the winter, or if they were led out for exercise during the brief hours of daylight. Some believe that in the harshest parts of Scandinavia, the livestock stayed indoors for months at a time to conserve their body fat and energy. This would mean that the Longhouse became a truly self-contained ecosystem, a sealed capsule of life floating in a sea of white snow. You look at the heavy door at the far end of the byre. seeing the thick frost creeping around the edges of the frame. It looks like a door to another planet. Inside, the cows are warm and the hay is dry. Outside, the world is a frozen void. You can understand why both humans and animals would prefer the crowded, smelly, but wonderfully warm interior of the hall. You walk deeper into the byre, your feet making a soft, muffled sound in the straw. The smell of the hay is wonderful. A concentrated essence of the previous summer's sun, dried and stored to be released in the dark of winter. You find a small pile of unused fodder and sit down, feeling the springy texture of the dried grass. From this low vantage point, you can see the underbelly of the longhouse. The massive roof beams overhead are heavy with the weight of the sod and the snow above. You feel the immense pressure of the winter pressing down, yet the house holds firm. It is a shield of timber and turf, a wooden cave that defies the elements. You watch a goat in the stall next to you. It is a small, shaggy creature with horizontal pupils that seem to hold a strange, ancient wisdom. It nibbles contentedly on a piece of clover, completely unbothered by the blizzard howling outside. The presence of the animals adds a layer of safety to the house that goes beyond just heat. They are the ultimate security system. If a predator were to try and dig through the walls, or if a stranger were to approach the door, the animals would be the first to know. Their restless movements and lowing would alert the household long before a human ear could catch the sound. You think about the bond that must have formed between the farmers and their beasts during these long months of shared confinement. They knew each other's scents, each other's sounds, and each other's moods. The health of the cow was the health of the family. If the cow died, the children might go hungry. It was a relationship of mutual survival, a contract written in the steam of their shared breath. You lean back against the wooden partition, letting your head rest against the cool branches. The humid warmth of the byre is starting to make you feel very drowsy. The sounds of the animals, the chewing, the breathing, the occasional thump of a tail against a wooden post, create a complex, rhythmic white noise. It is more effective than any modern sleep app. You imagine the families of the past, perhaps the younger sons or the farmhands, sleeping on the raised platforms right next to the stalls. They would have been close enough to hear the heartbeat of the livestock. It is a level of intimacy with nature that we have almost entirely lost, a reminder that we are all, at our core, creatures seeking a warm place to hide from the dark. A light joke comes to mind about the bovine alarm clock. You wouldn't need a buzzing phone to wake you up in the morning when a hungry cow is standing 3 feet away, letting out a resonant, bass, heavy moan because she wants her breakfast. It is a very direct way to start the day. You also wonder if the Vikings ever had favorite cows, perhaps giving them names or braiding their hair during the long, boring afternoons of midwinter. Given how much time they spent together, it seems almost certain. You can picture a grizzled warrior, famous for his deeds in battle, quietly whispering his troubles to a sympathetic heifer while he mends a leather strap in the dim light of the byre. Animals don't judge. They only listen and stay warm. You notice a small, high window, little more than a slit in the stone wall, near the roofline of the byre. A single ray of moonlight, cold and blue, manages to pierce through the gap and land on the straw. It looks like a shard of glass in the warm, golden atmosphere of the house. You watch the dust motes dancing in the light, tiny specks of hay and skin and earth. They move in slow, swirling patterns, caught in the invisible currents of air moving from the warm hearth toward the cold exit. It is a reminder that even in this enclosed space, the air is constantly moving, constantly being refreshed by the breath of the house. You feel the slight, cool draft from the window on your forehead, a refreshing contrast to the heavy warmth of the stalls. The structural integrity of the longhouse is most evident here, where the walls are often reinforced with stone to withstand the pressure of the animals. You can see the massive base stones, ancient boulders that were dragged from the fjord and set into the earth with agonizing labor. They are cold to the touch, but they provide the foundation for everything else. You realize that the longhouse is a masterpiece of balance. Between the heavy and the light, the cold and the warm, the human and the animal. It is a place where every element has found its equilibrium. You feel that balance within yourself as you sit in the straw. The frantic pace of your modern life has been replaced by the slow, steady rhythm of the byre. As you sit, you think about the fringe idea that some historians have proposed, that the proximity to animals actually helped to boost the immune systems of the Viking people. By living so closely with livestock, they were exposed to a variety of bacteria and viruses that may have made them hardier than their more civilized neighbors to the south. Whether or not this is true, there is no denying the psychological comfort of the byre. In a world where the gods were often seen as unpredictable, and the weather was a constant threat, the presence of the animals was a constant, grounding reality. They were a piece of the natural world that had been brought inside and tamed, a bridge between the wild forest and the domestic hearth. You watch as the goat in the nearby stall finally finishes its snack and settles down into the straw. It tucks its legs under its body and rests its chin on the ground, its eyes slowly closing. You follow its lead, adjusting your position in the hay until you are perfectly comfortable. The warmth is like a thick, woolen blanket that has been heated by the sun. You feel the tension leaving your jaw, your neck, and your hands. The world of the longhouse is closing in around you, but not in a way that feels restrictive. It feels protective. You are in the safest place you can imagine, a wooden sanctuary where the breath of the earth keeps the winter at bay. The distant sound of the fire in the main hall is now just a faint, crackling memory. Here, the dominant sound is the symphony of the stalls. You hear the soft, wet sound of a calf licking its mother's flank, and the dry rustle of a mouse scurrying through the rafters above. These are the sounds of life continuing, even in the depths of the great winter. You realize that the longhouse is not just a shelter for people, it is a life support system for a whole community of species. It is a wooden ark, carrying its precious cargo of genes and stories through the frozen darkness toward the distant promise of spring. You find yourself thinking about the byre maidens, the women whose job it was to care for the animals, milk the cows, and keep the stalls as clean as possible. It was a never-ending cycle of labor, yet it was also a position of great importance. The person who controlled the milk and the butter controlled a significant portion of the family's wealth. You imagine their hands, calloused and strong, moving with practiced ease in the dim light. They would have known every animal by name, every quirk of their personality. They were the silent architects of the home's prosperity, working in the shadows of the byre, while the sagas were being told by the fire. You feel a sense of respect for that quiet, essential work. A humorous thought crosses your mind about the Viking car wash. If a cow got particularly muddy or messy during a rare winter outing, the process of cleaning her up in a cramped, dark stall with nothing but a bucket of cold water and some straw must have been an epic struggle. You can imagine the splashing, the indignant lowing, and the inevitable moment when the human ended up more covered in mud than the cow. It's a reminder that history isn't just about battles and kings. It's about the daily, often funny, struggle to keep things clean and functional. It makes the Vikings feel much more human, much more like us. As your eyes grow heavy, the shapes of the stalls begin to blur and merge with the shadows. The wooden partitions look like the masts of ships, and the straw feels like the soft, rolling waves of a golden sea. You are drifting on the breath of the livestock, being carried toward a deep and restorative sleep. The Longhouse has many more secrets to share, hidden treasures beneath the benches and evening rituals over bowls of ale. But for now, the secret of the byre is enough. It is the secret of shared warmth, of mutual protection, and of the quiet, breathing peace that comes from living in harmony with the creatures of the earth. You take one last deep breath of the hay, scented air, feeling it fill your lungs with the memory of summer. The world outside the timber walls can do what it likes. Here, inside the bypass, the air is warm and the heart is still. You are tucked away in a corner of history, a guest of the four-legged keepers of the house. The rhythmic chewing of the cow is the last thing you hear before the darkness of sleep begins to pull at your mind. It is a good sound, a safe sound, the sound of a world that knows exactly how to survive. The light from the distant hearth flickers one last time, casting a long, dancing shadow of a goat's horns against the far wall. It looks like a crown, a symbol of the humble royalty that rules this end of the hall. You smile into the darkness, your body finally surrendering to the weight of the day and the warmth of the straw. The journey through the Longhouse will continue when the sun touches the roof. But for now, the night belongs to the breath and the hay. You are safe. You are warm. You are home. You turn away from the quiet, rhythmic breathing of the byre and make your way back toward the central part of the Longhouse, where the air feels lighter and the warmth of the hearth once again greets your skin like an old friend. As you walk along the raised wooden platforms, you notice that the space beneath the benches is not just empty shadow. It is a carefully utilized storage area, a hidden vault where the family's most precious possessions are tucked away from the damp and the dust. You kneel on the hard, packed earth, your knees finding a soft patch of stray rushes, and reach into the darkness under the edge of the timber palla. Your fingers brush against the cold, iron-bound corner of a large oak chest. This is the kista, the fundamental piece of furniture in any Norse household. It is heavy, solid, and built to withstand both the rolling deck of a longship and the weight of several people sitting on its lid during a feast. The wood of the chest is dark, polished by years of contact with woolen tunics and the palms of hands seeking support. You feel the intricate ironwork that wraps around the corners, a series of straps that are both functional and decorative, ending in small, curled flourishes that look like the frozen tails of mythical beasts. You find the heavy iron hasp and lift it slowly, feeling the weight of the metal. There is no sharp sound, only the smooth, sliding movement of iron against iron. As you lift the lid, the hinges offer a low, rhythmic creak that sounds like the house itself is whispering a secret. Inside, the air is dry and smells faintly of cedar, lavender, and the metallic tang of silver. It is a time capsule of a family's travels, their labor, and their status in a world where wealth was something you could carry in your hands. A mainstream historical fact that many modern visitors find fascinating is the role of the Viking woman as the keeper of the keys. In this society, while the men might have been the ones to travel and trade, the mistress of the house, the husfrige, was the absolute authority over the longhouse and its contents. You would often see a set of iron or bronze keys hanging from her belt, clinking softly against her jewelry as she moved. These keys were a public symbol of her power and her responsibility. To hold the keys to the chests was to hold the keys to the family's survival. If the master of the house was the ship's captain on the waves, she was the captain of the timber hall, and even the most fearsome warrior would not dare to open one of these chests without her permission. You imagine her now, standing in the amber light of the fire, the iron keys a heavy, reassuring weight at her hip. You reach into the chest and pull out a bundle of fine, cream-colored linen. It feels incredibly smooth against your fingertips, a stark contrast to the rough wool of the blankets you touched earlier. Beneath the linen, you find a small wooden box with a sliding lid. Inside, resting on a bed of soft moss, are a pair of oval brooches, often called tortoise brooches, because of their domed shell-like shape. They are made of bronze, covered in a complex web of swirling patterns that seem to move if you look at them too long. These were the standard fasteners for a woman's dress, but they were also miniature canvases for the most skilled metalworkers of the age. You feel the weight of them in your palm, solid, cold, and echoing with the history of the woman who wore them every day. They are not just jewelry, they are anchors of identity. Further down in the chest, hidden under a layer of extra tunics, you find a small leather pouch. You open the drawstring and pour a handful of silver coins into your hand. They aren't the uniform, round coins of a modern mint. These are a chaotic collection of silver dirhams from far off Baghdad, fragmented pieces of Roman silver, and thin, hammered coins from the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. To the Vikings, the value of these coins was not in the face stamped upon them, but in the weight and purity of the metal itself. If a merchant needed to pay for something that cost less than a full coin, he would simply chop the silver into pieces with his knife. You run your thumb over the jagged edge of a hack silver fragment, thinking about the thousands of miles this piece of metal traveled before finding its home under a bench in a Scandinavian fjord. You might joke that this was the 9th century version of a very complicated and heavy global debit card, though it probably didn't work at the local drive-through. As you sit on the floor, surrounded by these treasures, you realize that the most interesting secrets are not always inside the chests. You look at the dirt floor beneath the benches, noticing a small area where the earth seems slightly disturbed. Historians still argue whether the caches of silver and jewelry found, buried beneath the floors of longhouses, were intended as hidden bank accounts to be retrieved later, or if they were spiritual investments meant to provide wealth in the afterlife. There is a tension in the air as you think about someone kneeling in this very spot 1,000 years ago, frantically digging a hole in the middle of the night while an enemy fleet was spotted on the horizon. The floor of a longhouse is a library of desperate moments and hopeful offerings, a layer cake of history, where every inch of soil has a story to tell. A quirky and somewhat eerie tidbit about the treasures of the longhouse involves what archaeologists call foundation deposits. Sometimes beneath the threshold of the door or under the main structural posts. The builders would place specific items to protect the house from evil spirits or to ensure the favor of the gods. These weren't always gold or silver. Often they were symbolic items like an iron sickle, a handful of flax, or even the skull of a horse. You imagine the builders of this house carefully tucking a sharp iron blade into the earth before raising the first timber, a silent prayer for protection against the unseen dangers of the dark. It is a reminder that to the Vikings, the physical world and the spiritual world were completely intertwined. A house wasn't just made of wood and stone. It was made of rituals and intentions. You move your hand to the corner of the parlor, where the wood meets the wall. There, tucked into a small crevice, you find a tiny amulet shaped like a hammer. Thor's hammer, Mjaluna. It is made of simple lead, but it has been worn smooth by years of being touched or held. It's a small, private piece of faith, hidden away in a place where only the family would know to look. You think about the person who placed it there, perhaps seeking comfort during a particularly violent storm or hoping for the safe return of a loved one from a voyage. You might find it funny to think of this as a medieval version of a lucky charm or a "bless this mess" sign, but in the silence of the hall, it feels much more significant. It is a physical manifestation of a human need for safety in a world that felt very large and very cold. The light from the hearth is now a distant, low glow, and the shadows around the chests seem to deepen. You notice the way the wood of the chests is scarred with small nicks and scratches. Some of these might be from the tools used to build them, but others look like the marks of children's play or the accidental scrapes of a moving ship. Each mark is a memory. You feel the history of the objects as much as their physical presence. This chest has likely seen more of the world than many modern travelers. It has sat in the center of a bustling market in Hidebai, been lashed to the deck of a boat crossing the North Sea, and now rests quietly in the cool shadows of the longhouse. It is a veteran of the Viking Age, a silent witness to the expansion of a culture. You find yourself wondering about the items that didn't survive, the beautifully carved wooden bowls that have long since rotted away, the colorful woolen ribbons that have faded into dust, and the stories that were told while these chests were being packed and unpacked. The secrets of the longhouse are often the things we can no longer see. However, the items that remain give us a glimpse into a life that was surprisingly sophisticated. You see a small glass bead, deep blue with a yellow spiral pattern, that likely came all the way from the workshops of the Mediterranean. It is so small, yet it represents a network of trade that spanned continents. It makes you feel connected to the rest of the world, even though you are tucked away in a remote corner of the north. A light joke comes to mind about the Viking junk drawer. We all have that one drawer in our kitchen filled with random batteries, old keys, and mysterious pieces of plastic. In a longhouse, that drawer was likely a small wooden box under the bench, filled with broken brooch pins, scraps of leather, a single bone die for a game of Nefertofel, and a whetstone that has been worn down to a tiny sliver. Even a legendary warrior needs a place to put the stuff he doesn't know what to do with. You imagine someone digging through this box in the dim light, looking for a specific needle or a piece of string, and sighing with the same frustration that we feel today when we can't find the TV remote. It is these small, mundane moments that make history feel real. You shift your weight, feeling the coolness of the earth through your clothes. The darkness under the benches is a comfortable place, a quiet sanctuary within the sanctuary. You look at the heavy lid of the chest again, noticing how the grain of the oak flows like water around the iron straps. The craftsmanship is staggering. These weren't just utility items, they were objects of pride. To own a finely made chest was a sign that you were a person of substance, someone who had something worth protecting. You feel a sense of security just being near it, as if the solidity of the wood and the strength of the iron can somehow shield you from the uncertainties of your own life. The silence of the hall is absolute now, the only sound being the very faint, distant whistle of the wind through the roof thatch. You think about the fringe theory that some longhouses were actually built around these chests, that the storage of wealth was so central to the community that the house was essentially a secondary structure designed to protect the treasure house within. While most historians would say that's an exaggeration, sitting here in the shadows, it doesn't feel entirely impossible. The chests feel like the anchors of the room, the heavy weights that keep the house from floating away into the mist. They are the physical evidence of a family's history, a tangible record of their successes and their journeys. You reach out and touch a piece of wadmal that is draped over the side of the chest. It is a thick, felted wool, so dense that it is almost waterproof. In the Viking Age, this was the fabric of life. It was used for sails, for clothing, for blankets, and as a form of currency. You can feel the lanolin still in the fibers, a natural oil that gives the wool a slightly tacky, organic feel. It is the smell of the sheep, the mountains, and the long winter nights spent spinning and weaving by the fire. You realize that the real treasure of the longhouse wasn't just the silver and the silk. It was the ability to turn the raw materials of the landscape into something that could keep you warm and dry. The wealth was in the skill of the hands and the persistence of the spirit. As your eyes adjust further to the dark, you see the outlines of other objects tucked away in the corners. A stack of seasoned timber for repairing tools, a large stone weight for a loom, and a bundle of dried herbs hanging from a low peg. Everything is organized. Everything has a place. This is not the chaotic, cluttered den of a barbarian. It is the orderly, efficient home of a person who understands that in the North, disorder is a death sentence. You feel the discipline of the house, a quiet pressure to be useful and to take care of what you have. It is a grounding feeling, a reminder of the value of the things we often take for granted. You think about the locked bed from earlier and how these chests are a continuation of that theme of security. The Longhouse is a series of nested boxes. The house itself, the bed closet, the wooden chest, the leather pouch. Each layer provides a bit more protection, a bit more privacy, a bit more peace. You are at the very center of that system now, sitting in the dark with the silver and the wool. It is a very cozy kind of isolation. You feel like a dragon guarding a hoard, though a very sleepy dragon who would much rather have a nap than a battle. The weight of the world is kept at bay by the thickness of the oak and the depth of the shadows. A humorous thought occurs to you as you look at the iron keys again. You wonder if a Viking woman ever misplaced her keys in the straw, and if the entire household had to stop what they were doing to help her find them. You can imagine 30 people on their hands and knees, sifting through the rushes and the dirt, while the Husfrieger stands by the fire, looking increasingly annoyed. It's the kind of domestic drama that has probably been happening for as long as humans have had locks and keys. It makes the grand, epic scale of the Longhouse feel intimate and relatable. History is just a long series of people looking for their keys in the dark. The air in this part of the hall is still and cool, a refreshing contrast to the humid warmth of the byre. You take a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the old wood and the dry earth. It is a clean, honest smell. You feel the tension in your back beginning to ease as you lean against the side of the chest. The wood is unyielding but supportive. You are surrounded by the secrets of the timber hall, the hidden treasures that represent the heart of a culture. You realize that you don't need to see the items to know they are there. The weight of the chests, the presence of the iron, and the history of the floorboards all contribute to the feeling of being in a place of great significance. As the last of the fire's light fades to a dull, deep red, you prepare to close the lid of the chest. You move slowly, letting the heavy oak descend until it meets the base with a soft, solid vibration that you feel in your bones. The hasp falls back into place, a final note in the evening's symphony. The treasures are once again tucked away, safe in the darkness under the bench. You feel a sense of completion, as if by exploring these hidden corners, you have earned a bit of the house's trust. You are no longer just a visitor. You are someone who knows what lies beneath the surface. You sit for a moment longer in the total darkness, letting your other senses take over. You hear the slow creak of the roof, the distant, muffled sound of a sheep in the byre, and the rhythmic beat of your own heart. You are a part of the Longhouse now, a shadow among shadows. The treasures are silent, the wood is warm, and the night is deep. You are ready for the final parts of the journey, to see how the day ends and how the spirits of the house watch over the sleepers. But for now, you simply rest in the knowledge that even in the dark, there is wealth. Even in the cold, there is history. And even in the silence, there are stories waiting to be told. The journey continues, but the pace is slowing. The Longhouse is pulling you toward the final embers of the day. You feel the pull of the bed, benches, and the invitation of the dreams that are surely waiting for you. The secrets of the treasures have been revealed, and they are not just about silver and gold. They are about the people who held them, the hands that made them, and the house that kept them safe. You take one last deep breath of the cedar, scented air, and prepare to move back toward the light, carrying the weight of the silver and the softness of the silk in your mind. The timber hall is a place of endless discovery, and you are just beginning to understand its soul. You move slowly away from the heavy oak chests and the quiet shadows of the storage area, returning to the center of the hall where the fire has settled into a deep, steady rhythm. The evening is truly beginning now, a time when the physical labor of the day transforms into the quiet, repetitive motions of the night. You find a place on the main bench, feeling the familiar support of the wood against your back. Around you, the air is filled with the subtle, domestic sounds of a household preparing for rest. There is no loud talking or shouting, only the rhythmic movement of people engaged in their final tasks. You notice a woman sitting nearby, her hands moving with incredible speed as she works a pair of wooden cards through a pile of raw sheep's wool. She is preparing the fibers for spinning, and the sound of the cards brushing together is a soft, rhythmic whisper that seems to match the pace of your own breathing. The smell of the wool is stronger here, a rich and oily scent that reminds you of the animals in the byre. As she works, the lanolin from the wool coats her fingers, making them glint in the firelight. This was the never-ending work of the Longhouse, a constant cycle of turning the natural world into the things needed for survival. You watch the way the wool changes from a tangled, messy cloud into a smooth, organized sheet of silver fibers. It is a transformation that feels almost magical in its simplicity. You think about how every piece of clothing in this house, from the heavy sails of the longships to the softest tunic under a chest lid, began with this exact same motion. It is a slow, meditative process that requires no thought, only the steady memory of the muscles. A mainstream historical fact that underscores the importance of this ritual is that for the Vikings, ale and mead were not just celebratory drinks, but essential parts of their daily hydration. In many cases, fermented beverages were actually safer to drink than the local water, as the brewing process killed off many of the harmful bacteria that might linger in a pond or a shallow well. You see a large wooden bowl being passed slowly from person to person. It is not a modern glass or a delicate ceramic cup, but a heavy, two-handled vessel carved from a single piece of maple wood. The surface is decorated with intricate carvings of vines and leaves, and the wood has been stained a deep, dark brown by generations of shared drinks. This bowl is a communal object, a symbol of the bond that holds the household together. You reach out and take the bowl when it comes to you, feeling the weight of the liquid and the coolness of the wood. The all inside is a deep, cloudy gold, reflecting the orange light of the embers like a liquid sunset. As you lift it to your lips, the scent hits you, a complex aroma of toasted grain, wild yeast, and a hint of honeyed sweetness. It is a thick, nourishing drink that feels more like a liquid meal than a simple beverage. You take a slow sip, feeling the warmth of the ale as it moves down your throat and settles in your stomach. It is a gentle, comforting heat that complements the warmth of the hearth. You might joke that this is the original happy hour, though instead of a loud bar with neon lights, you have a smoky hall and the quiet company of a shaggy goat. Historians still argue whether the Vikings occasionally added specialized herbs to their ale to produce specific effects, such as the legendary berserker state. Some believe that plants like bog myrtle or even hallucinogenic mushrooms were used in ritual brewing, while others maintain that the strength of the ale was simply a result of long fermentation and high-quality grains. You look into the depths of the golden liquid, wondering what secrets are hidden in the brew. For now, however, it only makes you feel a deep sense of relaxation. The edges of the world are beginning to soften, and the shadows in the rafters seem to dance with a bit more grace. The awl is a social glue, a way of signaling that the work is done and the time for rest has arrived. A quirky and fascinating tidbit about the brewing process involves the yeast stick, or the tinge. Before the science of fermentation was understood, Viking families often had a specific wooden stick that they used to stir every batch of ale. They believed the stick was magical because it would bless the liquid and make it bubble and turn into ale. In reality, the porous wood of the stick was home to a thriving colony of wild yeast that survived from one brewing session to the next. These sticks were often passed down through families as precious heirlooms, and to lose your family's yeast stick was seen as a domestic disaster of the highest order. You imagine a young brewer carefully guarding a piece of old, gnarly wood as if it were a bar of solid gold. It is a beautiful example of how the Vikings blended practical reality with a sense of the supernatural. You watch as a man across the fire uses a small knife to carve a new spoon from a piece of birch. The shavings fall onto the floor in small, pale curls looking like wood, colored snow against the dark earth. His movements are precise and unhurried. In the Longhouse, there was no such thing as free time. In the modern sense, there was only a shift in the type of work being done. Evening was for the small, quiet tasks that could be done by the light of the fire. Mending a fishing net, sharpening a blade, or telling the stories of the gods. You feel the weight of this collective industry, a sense of purpose that doesn't feel like a burden. It is a natural part of the day's cycle, a way of ensuring that the household is ready for whatever the next morning brings. The communal drinking ritual continues, the bowl moving in a steady circle. As it passes from hand to hand, there is a sense of shared history. This bowl has likely touched the lips of everyone in the room, from the oldest grandfather to the youngest warrior. It is a physical manifestation of the concept of fellowship, a word that meant much more than just friendship in the Viking Age. To drink from the same vessel was to declare that you were part of the same tribe, bound by the same laws and protected by the same walls. You feel that connection now, a sense of belonging to this ancient wooden world. The Longhouse is more than a building. It is a community of breath and shared purpose. You notice a small bowl of salt sitting on a low table near the fire. Salt was an incredibly valuable commodity, often called white gold, because it was the primary way to preserve meat and fish for the winter months. You see someone take a tiny pinch of the salt and drop it into their ale, a common practice to help replenish minerals lost during a day of hard labor. It is a reminder that even in their moments of relaxation, the Vikings were always thinking about the needs of the body. Everything was functional, even the way they drank their evening ale. You find yourself appreciating the simplicity of it all. There are no complicated choices to make, no menace to navigate. There is only the ale, the fire, and the company. The light from the hearth is beginning to fade as the largest logs turn into glowing skeletal structures of white ash. The amber glow is replaced by a deeper, more crimson light that makes the carvings on the pillars look like they are made of cooling lava. You feel a heavy, pleasant drowsiness settling over you, a combination of the warmth, the awe, and the rhythmic sounds of the household chores. The woman with the wool cards has finished her pile and is now packing her tools away in a small wooden box. The man with the spoon is giving the wood one final polish with a piece of dried shark skin. The day is winding down to its final, quiet moments. You take one last sip of the golden ale and set the bowl down on the bench beside you. A light joke might be made about the Viking internet, which was essentially just people sitting around this fire and repeating the same stories they had heard for the last 20 years. If someone had a particularly interesting day, perhaps they saw a strange bird or found a new patch of berries, it would be the highlight of the week's entertainment. You realize that, without the distractions of the modern world, the senses become much more attuned to the small details. The taste of the ale, the texture of the wood, the way the smoke smells differently depending on what wood is being burned. All of these things become significant. You are learning to appreciate the slow movement of time, the way an evening can stretch out like a long, comfortable shadow. You think about the fringe debate regarding the use of hoods or specialized headwear worn during drinking ceremonies. Some scholars suggest that specific hats or veils were used to signify a person's role in the communal drinking ritual, though others believe these were simply practical garments used to keep the head warm in a drafty hall. You look at the people around you, seeing the variety of woolen caps and linen head scarves. In this light, they all look like participants in a sacred mystery. The act of sharing a drink in the dark of winter is, in itself, a kind of magic. It is a defiance of the cold and the isolation of the north. As you lean back, you feel the texture of your woolen socks against the hard, packed earth of the floor. Your feet are warm, and your body feels heavy and grounded. The Longhouse has a way of making you feel centered, as if you are exactly where you are supposed to be. You watch a small flame dance on the tip of a charred branch, a tiny blue spirit that refuses to go out. It reminds you of the persistence of life in this harsh climate. The Vikings were not just survivors. They were people who knew how to find beauty and comfort in the middle of a blizzard. The golden ale is a part of that beauty, a concentrated burst of summer sun stored in a wooden bowl. You notice a series of small nicks on the edge of the drinking bowl, marks where it has been set down on stone or dropped on the floor over the years. These aren't defects. They are the scars of use, the evidence that the bowl has fulfilled its purpose thousands of times. You run your thumb over one of the nicks, feeling the history of the object. It makes you think about your own life and the things you use every day. How many of them will be around in 1,000 years for someone to find and wonder about? The Longhouse encourages you to think in long spans of time, to see yourself as a single link in a very long chain. The silence in the hall is growing deeper, a textured quiet that feels like a physical presence. You can hear the very faint sound of the ale settling in the bowl, a tiny, effervescent hiss that is almost impossible to catch. The air is still, the smoke hole above catching a single, distant star as the clouds outside begin to part. It is a moment of perfect equilibrium. You are suspended between the work of the day and the dreams of the night, held in place by the warmth of the hearth and the spirit of the owl. You feel a profound sense of gratitude for this simple sanctuary, for the thick walls and the steady fire. A humorous thought occurs to you as you look at the empty drinking bowl. You wonder if the hangover was invented in a longhouse, and if the morning after a particularly enthusiastic feast involved everyone moving very slowly and speaking in whispers while the goats on the roof made as much noise as possible. It is a very human image that bridges the gap between the ancient world and the present. No matter how much time passes, some things never change. The need for connection, the love of a good story, and the occasional consequence of too much golden ale are universal human experiences. You smile to yourself, feeling a bit more connected to these ancient people. The darkness is now the dominant force in the hall, with the fire acting as a small, glowing heart at the center of the room. You see the final chores being completed. A heavy iron bolt is slid into place on the main door, a solid sound that signals the end of the day's movement. The world outside is officially shut out. Inside, the only thing that matters is the peace of the household. You feel the weight of the day lifting from your shoulders, replaced by the soft, warm pressure of the owl's influence. Your eyelids are growing heavy, and the rhythmic sound of the cards has finally stopped. The woman is leaning back against a post, her eyes closed, her work finished. You find yourself staring at the pattern of the grain in the floorboards near the hearth. The wood looks like a frozen river, a landscape of swirls and lines that tell the story of a tree's life. Everything in this house has a history, from the massive timber beams to the smallest wooden spoon. You are a part of that history now, a witness to the secrets of the evening rituals. You have seen the work, tasted the ale, and felt the bond of the community. It is a quiet, powerful experience that leaves you feeling calm and content. You are ready for the final transition, the move from the world of the living into the world of dreams. As you prepare to close your eyes, you take one last look at the golden bowl sitting on the bench. It looks like a treasure from a legend, even though it is just a simple piece of wood. The light of the dying fire catches the rim one last time, a final glint of gold before the shadows take it. You feel the warmth of the owl still radiating through your body, a glowing coal in your own chest. The longhouse is a vessel of warmth, and you are tucked safely inside its wooden embrace. The night is long, but you are not afraid. You are surrounded by the spirits of the house and the quiet presence of your fellow travelers. The journey is almost at its end, but the peace of the longhouse will stay with you. You have discovered the secret of the golden ale, that it is not just a drink, but a way of sharing life. You have seen how the evening chores are not a burden, but a ritual of care for the home. You are learning the language of the timber hall, a language of wood, fire, and shared breath. You take a long, slow breath, inhaling the scent of the smoke and the toasted grain. It is the smell of a world at rest. You are ready to drift into the final part of the night, where the spirits watch and the fire turns to ash. The golden owl has left a lingering warmth in your chest, and as you set the wooden bowl aside, you feel the final energy of the day begin to dissolve into a deep, heavy stillness. You stand one last time, your movements feeling slow and fluid, as if you are moving through a dream already. The fire has retreated into a landscape of glowing red canyons and white ash plateaus. You watch as the master of the house performs the final, most important ritual of the night, the covering of the fire. Using a long-handled iron tool, he carefully rakes the glowing embers into a compact mound and covers them with a thick layer of cool ash. This is a mainstream historical fact that underscores the practical nature of Norse life. By banking the fire this way, the coals are starved of just enough oxygen to keep them from burning away. Yet they remain hot enough to be blown back into life the moment the sun touches the roof in the morning. It is a way of preserving the soul of the house, ensuring that the light of today becomes the warmth of tomorrow. As the bright flames disappear, the shadows in the longhouse rush forward to claim the space. The amber light is replaced by a soft, bruised purple glow that seems to emanate from the very wood of the walls. You find your way back to your designated spot on the sleeping bench, feeling the cool air near the floor brushing against your ankles. You reach for the heavy woolen blankets and the thick sheepskins, pulling them over you layer by layer. The weight is immense, a comforting pressure that tells your nervous system it is finally time to let go. You think about the Viking thermostat, which was essentially just adding another layer of fur until you could no longer feel the draft. It is a simple, effective system that requires no electricity and never breaks down, though it does occasionally result in you waking up feeling like a very warm, very confused bear. In this deep, flickering twilight, your eyes are drawn back to the massive structural posts that hold up the roof. In the dimness, the carved faces and knots on the timber seem more present than they did during the day. You remember the belief that these posts were more than just supports. They were the dwelling places of the house spirits, or the landvater. The Vikings believed that a home was a living entity, a partnership between the humans who built it and the spirits of the land who allowed it to stand. You might find it a little unsettling to think that the ancestors are literally watching you sleep from the grain of the wood. But to the people of this hall, it was the ultimate source of security. You are not sleeping in an empty building. You are sleeping in the company of guardians who have stood watch for generations. Historians still argue whether the high seat pillars were purely decorative status symbols or if they functioned as physical conduits for the gods to enter the home during rituals. Some believe that the carvings acted as a sort of spiritual lightning rod, drawing the protection of Odin or Thor down into the very foundations of the timber hall. You look at the pillar nearest you, seeing the way the last of the red light catches a carved eye. It doesn't feel threatening. It feels like a silent promise. You are tucked away in a fortress of wood and faith, a place where the boundaries between the seen and the unseen are as thin as the smoke rising from the hearth. You feel a sense of profound peace, knowing that the house itself is on your side. A quirky and somewhat charming tidbit about the Longhouse involves the house leek, a small, hardy plant with succulent leaves that the Vikings often encouraged to grow in the thick sod of their roofs. They believed that these plants had the power to protect the house from lightning and fire, a belief that persisted in rural Scandinavia for centuries. You imagine the roof above you as a living garden, a green shield that keeps the house safe from the anger of the sky. It is a beautiful thought that the very grass and flowers above your head are working to protect your sleep. You might joke that this is the 9th century version of a home security system, except instead of a siren, you have a very quiet, very patient succulent. The silence of the hall is now so thick it feels like a physical blanket. You hear the slow, rhythmic creak of the roof beams as they contract in the cooling air. It is a sound of immense strength, the sound of a giant settling into a long slumber. You notice the scent of the house changing as the night deepens. The sharp smell of the fire is gone, replaced by the deep, earthy aroma of the sod roof, the sweet scent of the drying hay in the byre, and the faint, resinous perfume of the pine timber. It is the smell of the north, a fragrance that has been distilled over 1,000 years. You take a long, slow breath, letting the scent fill your lungs and calm your mind. You are breathing in history, one quiet moment at a time. You shift slightly under your furs, feeling the texture of the wool against your cheek. It is scratchy but warm, a grounded sensation that keeps you connected to the reality of the hall. You think about the people sleeping all around you, their breathing creating a soft, collective rhythm that matches the pulse of the dying embers. There is no loneliness here, only a sense of shared existence. You are part of a household, a group of people who have survived the day together and are now facing the night as one. It is a powerful antidote to the isolation of the modern world. Here, you are never truly alone. You are held in the wooden embrace of the Longhouse, surrounded by the breath of your kin and the silence of the spirits. A light joke comes to mind as you hear a particularly resonant snore from the far end of the hall. It sounds like a distant dragon, or perhaps a very large, very tired walrus. In a room with 30 people, the symphony of sleep must have been quite a performance. You imagine a young Viking trying to explain to his father that he can't sleep because the warrior next to him sounds like a collapsing mountain, only to be told that the snoring is actually a sign of a healthy, well-fed household. It is the kind of small, human frustration that makes the past feel so close. You find yourself smiling in the dark, the sound of the snoring becoming just another layer of the house's evening song. As you close your eyes, the image of the hall remains burned into your mind. The long hearth, the carved pillars, the heavy chests, and the shaggy animals in the byre. It is a world of order and beauty, built with hands and heart. You feel a deep respect for the builders, who knew how to turn a forest into a sanctuary. They understood that a house is not just a place to stay dry, it is a place to belong. You feel that sense of belonging now, a quiet certainty that you are exactly where you should be. The Longhouse has shared its secrets with you, and in return, it has given you its peace. The darkness is total now, save for the very faint, ghostly glow of the ash-covered hearth. You feel your body becoming lighter, the boundaries between yourself and the bench beginning to blur. You are drifting on the slow current of the night, moving away from the world of facts and into the world of dreams. The Longhouse is your ship, and the night is the sea. You are safe in the hull, protected by the oak and the turf. The winds may howl outside, and the frost may creep across the fjord, but here, in the heart of the timber hall, the air is still and the heart is warm. You are ready to let the story end, knowing that the silence that follows is not an absence, but a completion. The journey through the Longhouse has been a journey into the soul of a culture that knew how to make the most of every spark of light and every scrap of warmth. You have seen the secrets of the architecture, the hearth, the sleeping closets, the byre, the treasures, and the evening rituals. Each secret has been a thread in a rich, woolen tapestry that tells the story of human resilience. As you settle into your final position, you feel the weight of that history supporting you. You are a part of the Longhouse now, a shadow that will remain in its corners long after the sun comes up. The spirits of the wood are watching, the animals are breathing, and the fire is waiting. All is well. You feel a final wave of relaxation move through your body, starting at your toes and moving up to your forehead. Every muscle is loose, every thought is slow. The world is reduced to the warmth of your breath and the weight of the furs. You are sinking into the straw, into the wood, into the very earth itself. The Longhouse is a part of you now, a memory of warmth and safety that you will carry with you into the morning. You are ready to sleep, ready to dream of fjords and longships and the steady, golden glow of a fire that never truly goes out. The world outside has faded into a distant, quiet hum, and the air in your room is as still as the air in the great hall. Your journey tonight is over, and it is time to let the images of the Longhouse dissolve into the soft, velvet darkness of your own rest. You have wandered through the timber, sat by the glowing stones, and felt the ancient peace of a world that moved to the rhythm of the seasons. Now, let those images become the foundation of your dreams. Let the weight of the imaginary firs ground you, and let the scent of the phantom pine needles calm your mind. Your breathing is slow and deep, a steady anchor in the quiet sea of the night. There is no rush to return to the world of deadlines and noise. For now, you are a guest of history, protected by the memory of thick walls and a sturdy roof. The shadows are your friends, and the silence is your sanctuary. You have done enough for today. The fire is banked, the door is bolted, and the spirits are watching. You are safe, you are warm, and you are deeply, beautifully tired. As you drift further into the quiet, let the sound of my voice become a faint whisper, like the wind moving through the high grass on a sod roof. It is a soft, comforting sound that leads you toward the edge of sleep. You are moving into a place of perfect rest, where the only thing that matters is the steady beat of your own peaceful heart. The Longhouse is still there, holding its secrets and its warmth, waiting for you to return, whenever you need a place to hide from the cold. But for now, just breathe, just exist, just sleep.